Noting the hour, I'm calling the Acton Select Board meeting to order. And first up on our agenda is residents' concerns. And any residents' concerns? Seeing none in the room, are there any online? No. So moving to number 2, our chair update. I have really nothing at this time, except for I'll put out a plea for the community to investigate our various committees and figure out if there's a committee that interests you. I know the Agricultural Committee is looking for new members. The HDC is always looking for new members. The Human Services Committee, so there is something out there if that might pique interest. So, and now moving on to members' minutes. Or do we have does the town manager have an update? No. John, you don't have an update, do you?
Sure, I'll do something.
Okay.
Nice to see you all. I think there's an important Public Works forum that I hope will be mentioned by Dean, but I just wanted to mention it also on the 26th. And also we're doing sewer testing, smoke testing rather, in certain neighborhoods, and there's information about it on our website. And I encourage people to check out our social media pages, particularly Facebook. We've been trying to really put a lot more project updates there because we see it gets a lot of views. So check it out. Thanks.
Thank you. Member minutes? Alyssa?
Thank you. Just to add on to what you were saying, Fran, if folks want to talk, have a one-on-one conversation or one-on-two conversation about volunteer opportunities, come see us at Oktoberfest on Saturday, this Saturday from 10 to 3 at Gardner Field Playground. Fran and I will be at one of the town tents, and we'll have a binder with job descriptions for the various committees, and you can ask us any questions you have about volunteering for a board or committee. And this was mentioned at our last meeting, but just a heads up, tomorrow from 4 to 6:30 at the DPW site off of Forest Road is the Hazardous Waste Day. This is our second one this year. You do need a transfer station sticker to access that. And the Friends of the Acton Libraries are having their fall book sale on October 19th and October 20th. And the Apple Pie Contest, which is becoming an annual event, is going to be on October 27th. So visit the Friends of the Acton Libraries website to learn how you can enter your own pie, or just come and taste pies. The Acton Women's Club is also having a event on October 19th, the same day as the book sale at the library. It's their annual fall pie and bake sale. And I also wanted to let the public know that there is a children's event that's taking place at Nara Park on September 29th from 3 to 6 p.m. It will be at the pavilion. So Mr. Vick is at the amphitheater at 3 o'clock, but when that concert is over, you can come on over to the picnic pavilion, and it's an event to honor children who have been killed in Gaza and to honor the children who have been unable to go to school in the past year. So it's an event to celebrate children being children here. There'll be lots of activities, kite making, karaoke, and raffles. And part of the proceeds of the event will be supporting breastfeeding mothers in Gaza. And there is a local organization that's organized this event. And we just wanted to let everybody know that this organization exists, so if there are folks in town who would like to connect with families in the community that have relatives in Gaza, please reach out to one of the select board members and we can put you in touch with those folks. Thanks.
should I go now? Yes, David?
Sorry to jump in. The only thing I have is I was wondering if I could share on the screen, the flyer for the event that Alyssa just spoke about.
Sure.
I'll just leave it on the screen for a second because there's a QR code. So on the screen now is the copy of the flyer, and also similar to what Alyssa said, you can email either Alyssa at alyssanichol@actonmod.gov or me, David Martin, at actonmod.gov if you'd like a copy of the flyer. Thank you.
Thank you. Dean?
Okay, I have a few announcements to make. For long-time residents might recognize the name Vincent Russo Sr., who was on the Board of Selectmen back in the late 1960s and early 1970s, has passed on. Tomorrow night, Tuesday night, Community Preservation Committee will be having their annual approval of the Community Preservation Plan hearing. That will be at 7:30 in Town Hall. On Wednesday, the 25th, the Acton 250 Committee will be hosting Mary Fuhrer here in this room. She'll be discussing Crown Resistance Day. That starts at 7 p.m., and that has been sponsored by the Acton Lions Club. On the Thursday, the 26th, as noted by the town manager earlier, the Department of Public Works Building Committee will be hosting a public information meeting here in this room to discuss the proposed Public Works building project. The plans have been advancing, and it's time to get some public input on that. That will be at 7 p.m. And on Tuesday the 1st, the event sponsored by the Acton Lions Club and the Acton Memorial Library Foundation, Colonial Books and Brews. It will be at the Acton Memorial Library starting at 6 p.m. A variety of events, including a beer and merchandise for sale. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Thanks. News from the planning board. There has been a resignation from the planning board. So at our next meeting, I'll be asking to put on the consent agenda promotion of an associate member to a full member, and bringing forward a person who has gone through the VCC process into the associate slot. And we have more than one person who's gone through the process, so I'm, with the support of the chair, I'm going to recommend the person who's been on the list the longest. That's it today.
Thank you. Next up is our public hearing. It is under Mass General Law 140, Chapter 40, Section 22, the Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on September 23rd, 2024 at 7:10 p.m. in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room, 204 Acton Town Hall, 472 Main Street, and by video conference and call-in for a livery license for Yalago LLC, located at 15 Minuteman Road, Acton. Login instructions for computers can be found here. From a computer, please click on the link to join the public meeting, actonma.gov/meeting/BOS, or from a telephone, dial 646-876-9923 and enter webinar ID 503-918-785. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak after joining the meeting. Computer and app users may use the raise hand feature to request to speak. Hi there.
My name's David Wilson, 32 Fort Pond Road in Acton. With me is the applicant, Amr Fartosi. And I just wanted to give the select board a little background on Mr. Fartosi and his request. So he was General David Petraeus' interpreter in Iraq during the Iraq War. And once his family was threatened, they relocated here to Acton, and all his 4 boys all graduated from AB. They're all gainfully employed, and one serving in the United States military now. He originally was working for BASF as a Iraqi Arabic interpreter, and then when they no longer needed that, he started driving for Uber and is a 5-star driver there. But he's applied to become an Uber Black driver, and as a consequence, at Massport, they require, one of the things they require is from the town where he lives is your approval. So that's the background and why we're here today. And
Oh,
I was just going to say, the name of the company is Yalla Go. Yalla means go, it means go in Arabic.
thank you for the background. Any members have questions? David?
Hello, and thank you for applying for this license. I was just wondering how you're going to get your fares. Do you still get them through Uber this way?
Yes, I have the app from them and Lyft also, by the way. So I do both, Lyft and Uber.
Okay.
So this is how I get my fare.
Okay, and will you take fares any other way or just through Uber?
Like
Or you
if
feel it-
someone reached me for a ride to the, let's say, to the airport, then he can Venmo me. He can use Venmo to pay me.
Okay, yeah, I would say that there are people in Acton who would be interested in doing that. So I don't know how you might want to let them know, but
Absolutely, sure.
thank you.
I have one question that's not even related to the license at all, but Uber Black sounds fancy. Is that, what is the difference between Uber?
So the requirement for Uber Black is you first have to have a vehicle like a Suburban, a Tahoe, a bigger vehicle. You also have to actually get your livery license, and
1 million insurance.
and your insurance is $1 million. So it's higher than just being able to drive. For a normal Uber, you just have to have a car that's less than 10 years old. Yeah.
Do I hear a motion?
I move to close the public hearing. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, you might want to just call for public input.
Any calling users? Seeing none.
Now I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
David?
Yes. Yes, I move to approve the livery license for Yalago LLC at 15 Minute Man Road.
Second. Oh,
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you so much. First item on our new and special business, approve amendment number 1 to the Memorandum of Agreement with Apartments at Powder Mill LLC. And I think, John, you're up.
Thank you, members of the board. Apologies for not being there in person, but this is a memorandum of agreement that the town entered in 2020 with the developer for the apartments at Powder Mill, which at that time was a different entity that is with us tonight. So Dolben Company acquired the project and has been moving forward. You may have noticed that the buildings are gone. So they're doing a lot of work, and I think they wanted to clean up a few things with the MOA, and in those discussions, we also proposed to them that we make a change to one of the off-site improvements that had initially been negotiated in 2020 as creating a sewer extension up Sudbury Road. And so the amendment before you tonight, which I'll share in a moment, is an amendment to the memorandum agreement that's in your packet, and it just addresses a few points. Would you like me to do some overview of the project, though, just to remind people first?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so we have, remember, it came through as a comprehensive permit. So it'll be apartments, 230 apartments, and they will be including family housing and all the different requirements that you need to have for comprehensive permitted projects. And they're hoping to start construction right away. It'll be in South Acton, and as part of it, because the sewer doesn't go there currently, they will be constructing a sewer to reach their site and connect it to our existing wastewater treatment plant, which would mean that they'd have to take the sewer, run it down Route 62 to a pump station, and then up High Street a little bit to where it ends. And so as part of that, they would build that. And so the original MOA was for them to provide that in lieu of a privilege fee, which is what normally would be paid for a project like this. And so they're doing that. And in addition to that, they were providing funding to create an overflow tank to help mitigate the extra flow to the plant. And they were going to contribute towards that. And the amendment that we have tonight is to actually contribute more towards that instead of building more offsite sewer, which we don't have a specific need for at this moment. And given the capacity constraints that we're working with, I believe it's a better investment to have that money go towards mitigating the capacity concerns. So that's the best I could do for a remote summary of the project. But it's a lot better than I just made it sound. It's an exciting project for the town, something that everyone supported when it came through, and I believe everyone still supports it now. But this memorandum agreement would need to be revised. I'm happy to put it on my screen now, unless there's any initial questions. Let's see here. So the Dolben is a company, the development company, but the name, the entity that is created for this project is called Powder Mill Holdings LLC. And so that's the new entity that we're entering an agreement with. And this amendment basically says that they're building a project, that it was under the LIP program. Sorry, my fault. And then they went through all the appropriate approvals. It got an extension from the Board of Appeals, and it's working on permitting. It has to sign a regulatory agreement, and here's the changes. So they're building a pump station. They're building sewer on Route 62. And then the main thing here is paragraph 1 says, it kind of puts in narrative form where they're going to build it. And if you go to paragraph 3 or 2, it says that instead of doing that, they're going to contribute the amount that it would have cost to do that. And then the 4th paragraph includes some language that they were looking for to help, because they weren't able to start any of the work until all the approvals were in place. And this gives a little bit more flexibility to start some of them at their risk while we're still finalizing some of the permits that we need. Any questions?
Any questions from members? David?
Thank you, John. 2 things. One, so the main change is the deletion of the, I'll call it a spur, up Sudbury Road and down West Side Drive. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And one other thing, Do you know what the privilege fee would have been for the updated project?
Yeah, we looked at that. The privilege fee structure has changed a few times since this agreement was in place. It was actually changing almost at the time this became in place, originally in 2020, but now the sewer commissioners established a different fee schedule based on per bedroom and moved away from the SBU calculations. The engineering department looked at that this afternoon, and they came up with a number. Sorry, where'd it go? So yeah, the current fees for our sewer privileges are 14,000 for one bedrooms, 22,000 for two, and 30,000 for three. And if you look at that and you apply it to 230 apartments, it's roughly 4.4 million.
Thank you.
That would include the affordable units, and the affordable units within that number accounts for about 1.1 million. Oh, town council wants to correct me. Hold on. Can we bring Nina in?
Yes,
Yeah.
one second. I'll get that. It'll take just a second for her to be promoted. Hold on just a second. Here she comes.
I was going to correct John, but he corrected himself too quickly. So I was just going to note that the affordable units likely would have been waived if we were doing just a straight calculation on the privilege fee. The agreement itself does have the original privilege fee under the prior calculation. I believe that was I had it up a little while ago. I believe that was around 4 million as well. And what we did in the original negotiations was try to balance the improvements that the town would receive from the developer with what that offsetting what that privilege fee would be. And so the amendment that we've made now accounts for cutting off the spur. In return, we get the additional funds for the increased price of the holding tank infrastructure, given the passage of time.
Any other questions, Alyssa?
Thank you. Just continuing on this topic, I'm wondering if we have a total currently of the contributions of the developer, in addition to this newly calculated 544,000.
Oh, well, so the value of the work that they're constructing, they're actually here. They could speak to that. I don't recall exactly what it is, but I'm sure they'd be willing to say that. The other funding that's coming to the town in the agreement is it was 497 for the tank, and then there was some funding towards transportation in the range of $5,000 annually. At the time, they had estimated the value of all the sewer improvements at over 5 million.
Yeah, and I would anticipate, given the pandemic and what's happened with public construction in general, that those amounts have increased quite a bit.
Any other questions from members? Jim?
Sure. I'm sure I'm going to end up supporting this and voting in favor of it. But I know this has, given me some, just a feeling of great discomfort. The board at the time failed to recognize our opportunity to require this to be all-electric construction and not use fossil fuels. And the developer filed for their building permit on the very last day that they could avoid the requirements of our specialized stretch code, which would have pushed them quite considerably towards all-electric construction. So I'm irritated about that. And I remember when I heard that the MOA was up for discussion, I thought, well, hey, here's our perfect chance to, correct that mistake. But what I've heard is that it's too late. I'd love to understand why it's too late, and I'd also like to understand if it's not too late to do things like, as part of this negotiation, to require that there not be gas cooking in the apartments. I mean, as you know, the use of natural gas in stoves creates this. It's a very bad safety issue. Kids growing up in places with natural gas stoves have considerably higher asthma rates than people that are growing up with electric stoves. I mean, in addition to the climate impacts of the leaks there. So I would love to understand, first of all, just why, how, or why this issue is closed, and whether there's any room for details about what happens inside.
Sure. So I can take, John, unless you want to jump in, I can take kind of the general response to that, and then I'll let the developer speak to what can and can't be done at this point. When the developer adopted and essentially bought this development, they don't start anew with kind of ground up. They don't start from scratch. They bought a development that was fully designed and planned out. I think some tweaks were made, but at the point where we were discussing the MOA and discussing the fact that the unit mix had changed, it was fairly far down the path of permitting, as I understand it, with the state as transferring the permit from the prior developer to the new developer. And the change to electrification at that point would require kind of a wholesale redesign of the infrastructure of the building. So I think that our leverage to say, well, instead of paying sewer privilege fees, we'll have you electrify the entire building. The problem, there's really two problems with that. The first is, in order to get them hooked up to the sewer, we do need the sewer infrastructure. And they either, under the bylaw, we can't negotiate kind of anything we want. Under the bylaw, they either pay the sewer privilege fee or they pay the cost of the connection, the construction connection. So it's not, and second of all, if we're coming to a memorandum of agreement with a developer over their project, it needs to be something that is at least somewhat related to what we're charging them fees for. So here we're charging them fees for the sewer connection. We would need to have some sort of nexus between the sewer connection and whatever changes we'd be asking for from the project. And that's just not as direct. So it'd be much easier for the developer simply to say, no, that's unreasonable given the ask and given that the project is fully designed at this point.
I think,
as far as
yeah, to speak to this question of the stove, though, I think we can let John O'Connor manages the project for Dolben. and he's raised his hand.
May
Oh, there he is.
Yes, yeah.
John, you should be able to speak, or Jesse could also speak. Oh, there he is.
Hey there. Good evening. I'm John O'Connor from the Dolman Company, Senior Vice President Development for the company. And to answer your question about the gas use, we are using gas only for heat and hot water. Everything else will be electric powered, electric cooking, electric dryers. So organic gas is only for heat and hot water.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Any questions?
Well, sorry, just one.
Jim?
Just a last appreciation to town staff, from the manager's office and to the sustainability department for at least, trying to have persuasive conversations about the win-win of going all electric. But those didn't pan out, and I understand where we are. I guess my only celebration here that I can pull out of this one is that this is the last large building that's going to be built in Acton that has fossil fuels providing heating.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Do we have any online callers? No. Are we ready to approve the amendment? Give a motion.
I move to approve amendment number 1 to the memorandum of agreement with Apartments at Powder Mill LLC.
Second?
All in favor?
Sorry,
Oh,
that was the motion I may have given you. I don't know if it's the right wording. Is it? Sorry, isn't the company different? Or the agreement's
Sorry,
the same?
I'm looking at the agenda, not a motion that was given. Did you send it in an email?
No, I'm sorry. I'm just double checking that that motion is correct, because if I was in the room, I would have waved or something, which I can't do that. Is it the right language? Because I don't think it's referred to as amendment number 1. That's what I put on the
Oh.
agenda by accident, I think. What is it called?
John, that's fine.
Okay,
Amendment
thank you.
number one
Sorry.
works. Yeah, let me, it's probably called, yeah,
It's called-
it's just amendment, but we can call it the amendment number 1 or First Amendment.
Well, there is already an amendment number 1 referred to in the whereas clause.
Is there?
The fifth whereas clause?
Yeah, isn't that referring to it's not referring to an MOA amendment. That's referring to a permitting amendment.
did we hear a second? Mm-hmm. Oh, great. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Neto.
And moving along to number 5, approve recruitment process for town accountant.
Thank you. This is something that sort of mirrors what we just did for the town clerk recruitment. And so I'm just seeking the board's approval, since it is a select board appointment. I'd like to work on bringing in some candidates and interviewing them, and then bringing a finalist for your approval. And the timeline is laid out. It's supposed to start this week, I think, if it's approved tonight. Happy to take any questions. I realize it said that job description wasn't closed and that it wasn't, but just know that the town accountants, this job description is pretty, they make sure we do everything right from a financial standpoint. And we can get the job description afterwards, if that's helpful.
Thank you. What process were you considering, John, with the same? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Just that we'd put out the job this week and we'd try to get interviews started in October and bring a candidate to you. I think I had it as of bring a candidate before the board in November, like November 18th is the goal. Because Joanne is retiring on December 20th. And so if we could hire someone by mid-November, there's a pretty good chance they could start by mid-December. And that we would keep that position constant.
Thank you. Would you want any board members involved in the interviewing process, like the town clerk position, or?
Yeah, it would be great to have two members involved as last time. And I would default to the chair and the vice chair. I think in the last time, I think I was able to involve each of you in a different way, whether it's reviewing materials or whatnot, and I would do the same here. But I'm happy to take suggestions on a different process.
Thank you. No, I thought that was great. Any discussion? No? Sounds good. Jim?
I've got a motion here, if that's helpful.
That's great.
I move that the board approve the proposed process for recruiting and appointing a town accountant as outlined by the town manager in the memo in our packet.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you, John.
Thank you all.
So number 6, discussion on 2024 Indigenous Peoples' Day. Alyssa?
Thank you. So Jim and I wanted to update the board on our efforts over the past year or so. We've been working alongside the DEI office, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Director, to do some relationship building, a little bit of healing and repair, and wanted to just make it very clear that it's a very slow, deliberate, thoughtful process involving members of the Neshoba tribe, and our education involves many other Indigenous peoples as well, as we read and visit exhibits and go to lectures. I feel that a really noteworthy success that we had last year was having Strong Bear Medicine lead the land blessing ceremony when the East Acton Village Green Pocket Park was commemorated. And we also very recently, just a couple months ago, held a listening session with the Neshoba Praying Indians. Jim and Wanjiko and I were there so that we could all get better acquainted with our intentions and expectations, concerns, and desires for how the town can work together with the tribe. We also attended the very first, I think, Strawberry Moon Powwow at Fay Park in Littleton. That was held on June 24th. And we attended a talk at the Rubenhor Library in Littleton to learn more about the ceremonial stone landscapes that are all over this area, and efforts that are ongoing to protect them by members of the tribe and others as well. We both attended a couple of talks by Strong Bear and Littleton historian Dan Bodillion on the history of the Neshoba. One was at the Orchard House in Concord in November, and one was here in Acton just last week. David was there as well. Wanjiko is also working on organizing an Indigenous Peoples' Day event, not for this year, but for the future. And it will be some sort of community conversation, panel discussion related to Indigenous Peoples' Day. I also encourage board members and the public to attend an upcoming powwow. It's also on Saturday, so I'm gonna dash away from Oktoberfest to try and catch the last of it. It's going to be in Natick, and it's actually an annual powwow that's been held for many, many years. The annual Harvest Moon and Creator Praise celebration. So that is hosted by the Massachusetts Praying Indians of Natick Tribe, and it's held at Kulsick State Park in Natick from 10 to 5, and you can find information and an address very easily on the internet. Also, we learned last week that Strong Bear and Dan will be doing a lecture on ceremonial stone landscapes at the Littleton High School Performing Arts Center. So that's going to be on October 18th at 7:30 p.m. So the audiences at the Reuben Hoare Library in Littleton, there was standing room only. So audiences are growing larger. So they were able to find a location, a high school auditorium that can seat as many people as want to come. And that is a ticketed event because it's part of the Littleton Lyceum, the high school's drama series. But the tickets are actually pretty reasonable. You can get season tickets for a family for $40. So you can go to all of the shows for everybody who lives in a household, or you can just buy individual tickets. And I looked at the website, it's $12 per person, $5 for students and seniors. And just today, I got an email from Friends of Pine Hawk, and if anybody's not familiar with Pine Hawk, it's the name of the site in South Acton where the wastewater treatment plant was built, and there were, because it's right along the river, there were a lot of Indigenous artifacts found there. There was a big study, dig that retrieved those artifacts and preserved them. There's some displays in the Acton Memorial Library. So Friends of Pine Hawk is the organization that sort of advances education about that site as well as other native sites in the area. And October is Archaeology Month. So they always have lots of programming in October. And there's a couple of talks that are related to Indigenous peoples. One is at the Acton Memorial Library called Burying the Trowel, which will talk about the differences in how people think about all of these stone structures, piles and walls, and the debate about that. And then also here in Town Hall will be a Native Americans and the Revolution talk, and this is co-sponsored with the 250 Committee and Pine Hawk, and that will be on December 5th, Thursday, December 5th at 7. So these are just all opportunities for us to learn more and advance our relationship. Jim has some very specific efforts that he's been working on alone, independently, or without me, with other people. So I'll turn it over to you, Jim, to update the board on those efforts, and then come back to give a suggestion about where we can go from here for this year.
Thanks, Alyssa. It was great hearing that list of all the stuff that I hadn't sort of strung all that together in my mind. It's great to hear it. So the thing that came out for me out of the listening session that we had with Strong Bear was the history of, broken promises and harms done to the Neshoba Praying Indians in particular, and how that has left a reluctance to run towards like written agreements, recordings, the way that we are developing a relationship. It needs to start primarily from time together and specific actions, things that we do that indicate that we're actually getting what they care about. So to that end, in one of the talks, Dan Badillion and Strongbear mentioned the boundaries of the original Neshoba praying Indian village. And there is a southwest corner that, although at the time was not in Acton, although at that time Acton was conquered anyway, that is now in Acton. So it was something that I could actually do something about, with my Acton hat on. After an exchange of like a postcard and some emails, I'm meeting this week with the landowner who owns the land on which this large rock with smaller rocks on it appears to still be there, marking the southwest corner. And I'm going to be talking with the owners about how to be respectful towards this object. I'm coming in clear with them that the town has absolutely no authority here. This is their land now, but that they were also very interested in finding a respectful way to sort of set aside this particular monument, not disturb it. And so we're going to be talking about that and talking about the potential further involvement of the praying Indians with being able to visit the site from time to time and so on. So that was exciting. It felt like a nice concrete step towards showing that we get that a lot of the history that's left is in the stones. It's in the rocks. They sit there and they've been there for hundreds of years. And the ones that haven't been disturbed are still deeply meaningful. So hopefully that's part of that's part of this slow conversation we're having.
Thank you.
Thank you for finding that and connecting with those landowners. I'm allergic to poison ivy and ticks and tall weeds, so I'm so happy to have Jim as a partner in this. So I just want to make it clear that the board has, for the past couple of years, declared the second Monday in October of that year Indigenous Peoples' Day for the town of Acton. And also remind everyone that for decades, Massachusetts indigenous tribes have been petitioning the state to change the second Monday in October from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day. And we can all choose whether or not to support that effort as individuals. But in all of these interactions and conversations that we have been having, not once has Indigenous Peoples' Day come up from the particular tribe that we're building a relationship with. And also, I think it's important to acknowledge that a permanent official calendar change would be performative unless there was a meaningful action to go along with that, concrete. And hold on one second. And so I think that what we can do as a board is repeat the action if the board desires that we've done the last couple of years, and then just move forward next year to see how this event that Wanjiko is organizing goes. It'll be an educational event. Dan Bodillion sent around an email to all of the Friends of Neshoba Praying Indian email list members after the talk last week at Church of the Good Shepherd, just thanking everybody for coming and noting the upcoming events. And at the end of that email, noted that the goal, the objective is just to continue building awareness that this is a living landscape that was impacted by Indigenous peoples for millennia, that they are living people, they are still here, they are our neighbors, and that will continue to happen through these events including annual powwows and Indigenous Peoples' Day events. So that was the very first time in an email that I had seen any reference to Indigenous Peoples' Day. So I think that just to, maintain the momentum of a respectful, trusting relationship, we should, not pursue the permanent calendar change right now. But happy to entertain this calendar year if the board would like to do that.
Well, you know what my vote is. David?
So thank you both for doing all this. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the ongoing efforts. I'm interested to hear on an ongoing basis what is a meaningful action that we can perform, whether it's, whatever it is, a permanent Indigenous Peoples' Day event, or I don't know what would be most meaningful. But I would be interested in taking the one-year proclamation again.
Dean?
Do we have a draft of the one-year proclamation, or is this something that you would bring back to our subsequent meeting?
I actually didn't write anything because I think that sort of a proclamation, declaration, some official act should only accompany action. So what we did last year was just move to declare Monday, October, this year it's 14th, 2024, as Indigenous Peoples' Day in the town of Acton. So just a motion rather than a proclamation.
So moved.
I'll second that, and then we can talk some more about it.
Are we interested in another discussion, or?
I'm ready to vote. I don't know how others feel.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Any opposed? Number 7, Water Resource Advisory Committee, WRAC, Stormwater Management Presentation.
Actually, please start talking. I just realized that I was going to have to do this, so it'll take me just a minute. Oh, it is. I didn't do that. Oh, John must have done it. Ooh.
Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Joseph Robb. I am the chair of the Acton Water Resources Advisory Committee. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here today. I appreciate it. First, let me tell you why I'm here. So we're making this presentation because first, in February of this year, we came in front of you and asked you what we should be working on. We gave you a list, and you identified stormwater as one of the areas of interest. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is in June, the DPW gave a nice presentation about stormwater upkeep, and they summarized a study that had been done last year. And one of the things that they said was that they needed a sustainable funding source for stormwater upkeep. And so the discussion that happened after that presentation, the select board asked for WRAC's independent input on this topic. So that's what this presentation is today. So next slide, please. So this presentation will cover basically 4 topics. And John, if you're driving, yeah, thank you. So today I'll give a brief summary of the state of stormwater management in Acton, describe stormwater management in other towns in Massachusetts, describe some potential funding sources for stormwater management in Acton, and then finally I'll give just a slide with some of our recommendations and then try to answer any questions you might have. So next slide. You know, the DPW already gave you a summary of this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but this is a brief summary of the Stormwater Asset Management Plan. It was prepared by an outside consultant that summarized the status of Acton's stormwater assets and also presented costs to maintain the current infrastructure. And so as you can see on the slide there's some statistics. There were 109 culverts out of 133 that were inspected, 49 out of 54 detention basins were inspected in the field, and about 11,000 feet out of over 400,000 linear feet of storm drains. So not much of the storm drains were inspected. But that was a start. That was a field survey of infrastructure in the town of Acton. And they did a prioritization process that identified, immediate attention topics, high priority infrastructure, and then lower priority. So they gave a ranking through it. So it's kind of a roadmap for moving forward. And then they created, in this table on the bottom here, if you can see, is basically it's the capital improvement plan. And this is just a summary from the plan. This is based on the infrastructure that they were able to identify. So this is not, the final answer. This is just cost estimates for maintenance based on what they were able to inspect. The first column, status quo, that is kind of just doing, say, one culvert repair every 1 to 2 years. So it's kind of a minimal approach to maintenance. And just to give a reference to that, they identified 21 culverts in Acton that were high priority for repair. So status quo is not really going to get you to taking care of high priority things. The second scenario there is priority capital improvements. So that one was focusing in on that, the things that need to be fixed, but it didn't also include, scenario 2 doesn't include just annual maintenance. And so that's what the third scenario is. It's basically capital projects, priority capital projects, and the annual maintenance. You can see the cost there. We're from scenario A, we're talking, and I should explain, the 5 years, if you do all of this in just 5 years, the 10 years, if you spread these activities over 10 years. So that's the difference in the costs. Anyway, the sustainable one, or the one that attempts to address not only near-term priorities, but longer-term management in a sustainable way, the costs are between $1 million and $1.6 million. So we'll go to the next slide. And before we talk more about money, why do we even care about this? So this is the why slide. So there's really two categories of why we would want to fund stormwater infrastructure maintenance. The first one's maintaining and improving public health and preventing infrastructure damage. There's some examples there for that. And then the second one is the town of Acton is subject to a federal permit. It's a long list of words there that most people never say. It's the NIPD's permit. It's a stormwater management permit. In Massachusetts, many towns are regulated by US EPA under a general permit. So that's known as NIPD's and MS4. So those are the reasons why we should care about this. I'm happy to get into it more later, but I'll just move on to the next slide and just show you a picture of what happens if we don't keep up with our stormwater infrastructure maintenance. So this is just a picture of Hemlock Lane in Acton in December 2023. It's an example of stormwater infrastructure that was not capable of conveying stormwater quickly enough to avoid flooding due to clogging. So this is an example of the kind of thing that we're trying to avoid through a stormwater management system. Next, I'll talk a little bit about other communities in Massachusetts, so we can go to the next slide. And there are more than 20 communities in Massachusetts that have created stormwater utilities. This is a map of New England, and you can see that Massachusetts has more than the rest combined, actually. So it is something that's gaining momentum here in Massachusetts. And then we'll go to the next slide. And I realize that the font may be a little small for you. I'm sorry about that, but let me show you what this is. This is a list of all of the towns that have stormwater systems set up, and there's a column for the cost, and then there's a column for the fee type. I'll try to give you a little bit of background of these fee types. Different towns come up with different ways to fund these things. So one of them, the top one there, is based on impervious area. The reason why they use impervious area is surfaces like rooftops or asphalt that don't allow for infiltration of stormwater. It's basically the areas that cause stormwater runoff. So those are the areas that, Some towns say, all right, the more impervious area you have, the greater that you should contribute to the maintenance of our municipal stormwater system. Other towns will just use a fixed fee. That one's easy. It's the same for everybody. It's doesn't require complex mapping using GIS or any kind of abatement structure. So the fixed fee is kind of an easy one. And we definitely in our research noticed that some towns who were looking for a little bit easier way to start would start with a fixed fee and then gradually migrate over to impervious area, or this other concept, ERU, equivalent residential unit, which is another method that's based on impervious area, but they kind of build bins. And one ERU is like the average size of impervious area in a town. And I might have one ERU and Jim might have half of an ERU or something like that. So it's a way to have a fee structure that's based on impervious area. So it's pretty similar. There's a lot of pros and cons to all of those that I won't get into. But I will also say all of our listing there of the fees, the median fee was for residential, for a single residential property was $72 in the most recent fees in Massachusetts. So that's kind of the ballpark that we're talking about. So I'd like to move now to talk about the different types of funding that are available. So we'll go to the next slide. And this chart is on 2 slides, but on the first slide, the top 2 there, rows 1 and 2, are methods to fund stormwater programs that we are calling the sustainable methods. And what I mean by that is that they provide long-term recurring source of funding to pay for stormwater management. The property tax and general funds have the benefits of, they can be leveraged to pay back loans. It's an existing funding source. But the challenge is with using property tax is that it's, there might be competing needs one year. There may be some big thing that happens in town and, we're not going to do so much stormwater maintenance this year. So that's one problem. And then it's also not based on the contribution. So really, you're using the general fund to pay for stormwater management, but someone who contributes the most stormwater would be paying, maybe a similar amount to someone who doesn't. So it's not linked to use of the resource. The next one is a stormwater utility, an enterprise fund. So that's kind of a management structure and a funding approach together there. And the benefits of that one is it is based on stormwater impacts. It's dedicated and stable funding source. And this one you can pursue the state revolving funds. So once you've got that set up, that puts you in a position where you can pursue that kind of funding. The challenges associated with that are that it requires approval by the voters and, like any sort of infrastructure maintenance thing, it might be prone to increasing rates over time. So that's a super fast overview of those 2 funding sources. The rest of the things in this table are all kind of like good things to pursue but they're not necessarily a sustainable ongoing. So grants, for example, there are numerous grants available. Doesn't require repayment, but it's not a consistent source of funding. It's something that you might get this year, but not next year. And then moving to the next slide, you've got bonds and loans. I think this board and you all have a pretty clear understanding of bonds and loans. Those do need to be repaid, but they can be a good source to address one-time costs. The last 2, number 5 and number 6, stormwater permits, connection fees, and special assessments and benefit districts. Those are like, you can think of those as project-specific things. So when you have a development, the developer will pay a certain fee to create stormwater infrastructure. So those are good for those specific projects, but not necessarily to fund your entire compliance system. So that's a quick overview of the funding mechanisms for stormwater. And as I mentioned, they're not mutually exclusive. You can certainly have a stormwater utility with an enterprise fund and then pursue grants or that kind of thing. So then moving to the recommendations, sorry. Moving to the recommendations, we think in the short term, the DPW is doing this work now. And, we don't see an advantage to changing that in the near term. They're working on this compliance. They've got a record of making sure that we're in compliance with the regulations and maintaining the stormwater infrastructure. In the future, we may discuss some other entity that would take care of this, but that's further down the road. And so, that we think in the near term, the DPW should stay involved and be leading this. The last part there about conducting a stormwater management feasibility study, this is what we think is the next logical step to perform. And so this study would look at the pros and cons of those two sources of funding that I was calling sustainable, and in fact, evaluate the sustainability of those funding mechanisms. It should look at the Massachusetts enabling laws and look to see, do we need to do any local rulemaking? And then, any of these approaches, we need to look at the ability to meet those MS4 requirements. That's a federal requirement, and, those are things like street sweeping, cleaning of catchment basins, public outreach and education, and so we need to make sure that whatever approach we follow can meet those requirements. And then lastly, we view this study that we're suggesting should be done as an opportunity for educational outreach. We think if you don't build public awareness and receive feedback from the public, there's the possibility that, folks wouldn't understand why we need to do this, why it's important. And so we think that through this study, you could have some events where you present information about stormwater management, you listen to the public's concerns about stormwater management and kind of bring people on board, and maybe adapt the approach based on public feedback. So this feasibility study, we're not suggesting that you do a study right now that picks one of the solutions and how you implement it. We're suggesting take a step back and look at those two different sustainable approaches and try to figure out what's the right one for Acton. So I'd be happy to try to answer any of your questions.
Thank
you. Yeah.
Any questions from David?
Yes, thank you so much for putting this together. It's very enlightening. Personally, I'm pretty worried about this subject going forward. Northeast of North America is, as much as we understand climate change, is expected to get more rainfall as we get further into climate change. And I think we've already seen that. Just a month ago, there was severe flooding in central Connecticut. And again, for the second time in 2 years in northern Vermont, northern to central Vermont. And so, in central Connecticut just a month ago, communities got a foot of rain in a few hours. And I think, we have even relatively small streams and brooks that go under roadways and things like that. It could be dangerous for people to attempt to cross them in a flash flooding situation. And, there's all sorts of things. Anyway, thank you very much for doing this. The other reason I think this is really good to figure out is there's, I think there are efficiencies for the town involved in stable funding, right? Where the projects that we can do next year are not clear until town meeting the previous year, which is just really 2 months before the next fiscal year starts. That's hard to prepare, and and it's you can't properly staff or have the proper equipment and all that for that, because it's hard to predict what you're going to be doing the following year. So anyway, all that I think is really good. I need to read. I read this before the meeting. I need to read once again. I appreciate your work, and I would definitely be in favor of going forward with the feasibility study that you recommend. I do have one really detailed question where you talked about a fixed fee method of funding. Is that fixed fee per single family house, or is per square foot of property, or what is it fixed on?
I've seen in Massachusetts fixed fee for residential and then another fee for commercial. They're not necessarily based on impervious area. Basically, what they do would take, say, the 1.6 million is the right amount, and you have this many properties. You just divide that in, and that's your fixed fee. You're just spreading it out. If you need this much money and you have this many people, you do the math, and that's your fixed fee. So there's some that are that simple, but they lack the equity part. And you'll have people coming and saying, you're charging me this much, but I don't have any stormwater leaving my property, and here's the proof of it. So it has the downside of not necessarily being linked to how much stormwater runoff there is. I have seen these other towns that try to develop more equitable approaches where they'll have an abatement process and you can come and make a petition and do all that. And a lot of people have a lot of views on that, so they end up becoming complex systems that require a lot of debate. But I mean, other towns, Concord's doing it right now, and so other towns have accomplished that. So I would actually say that there's some very good templates out there already of how to establish these fees that are based on impervious surface and how to allow people to come and ask for abatements. And so it's not impossible at all. But so the flat fee is just basically simple: how much money do you need and how much do you need to charge each person?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other members? Dean?
Yeah, I've noticed in other parts of the state, primarily down on the Cape and other parts of the country, there seems to be a great deal more use of permeable surfaces for things like driveways. You know, pea stone driveways, oyster shell driveways, that sort of thing. I believe that down in the Pinelands, down in New Jersey as well, they're working really hard to eliminate any excess pavement. As a follow-on to all this, do you think that there would likely be some involvement with other town boards and committees and departments, maybe involving zoning changes, review of site plans, even for residential purposes by the building department, for instance, and find some way to calculate those permeable surfaces, or as it would seem like an equitable way to do it would be to, rather than a fixed fee, be able to actually use GIS, satellite mapping, or whatever to calculate out the impervious areas of individual residential lots. I'm thinking about how many people end up building concrete patios in their backyard long after the house has been built, and it certainly has an impact. So I think it looks like it's going to be a very involved process, using a lot of stakeholders here in the town, that some exist and some that probably don't exist quite yet. Any thoughts that you might have, I'd appreciate.
Yeah, the WRAC committee has talked a lot about that. We actually had a meeting at one of our members' houses, sitting on his patio in the back of his house. And we looked around and he said, it was like individual stones, but the material in between was permeable material. So it actually was a patio that allowed for infiltration. The same gentleman routed all of his stormwater from his roofs to plantings around his house to promote infiltration. And so I think there actually is quite a bit that has been learned, best practices in terms of stormwater for residential. So I do think there's room in any kind of stormwater utility to promote those best practices moving forward. You could allow people to demonstrate that they already have them, or you could, make the rate structure so that if people put them in, they could get an abatement. So yeah, I think that there's a lot that's been learned, and a lot of nice, beautiful things that you could have around your house, like these detention basins that are also wildflower gardens. So I think there's a lot that can be done, and it would have the end goal of promoting less stormwater runoff going into the municipal system, so there's less maintenance required of the municipal system.
If I could follow up on that. It would be like the reverse, the situation I see in the Southwest, where communities end up actually reimbursing individuals for tearing up grass that's eating up too much water, and installing xeriscaping.
Yeah.
So
It would be.
I think as a long-term plan, that might be something that people could think about. Thanks.
Jim?
Thanks for this work and presenting it so clearly. Reactions I have, first of all, yeah, it does seem sensible to go ahead with a feasibility study. And my opinion on the fees is, I love the notion that in large commercial projects, that a developer can see how much more they're going to have to pay the more they pave. I mean, right now we have, our zoning bylaws require, you can't exceed this. They have, sort of strict, yes or no boundaries on what you can do. But with a fee that's based on permeable surface, you have an incentive. You can say, hey, if I can, put less paving here, then I'll save money year after year. That seems like a good thing. So it seems to align developers' incentives with what the town needs. So I appreciate that.
Dean?
Yeah, another thought along the line of primarily residential development, but commercial as well. And the runoff coefficient of a turf area is certainly higher than of a woodsy area. So I wonder if that might, discouraging people from putting in grass could serve a lot of benefits, cutting down on the amount of stormwater runoff, encouraging a more diverse landscape. I think of, some neighborhoods I drive through where, you got a house, you got a paved driveway, you've got a half acre of tightly compacted turf and 4 trees. And I just got to figure the amount of runoff from that, even though, yeah, okay, it's green infrastructure, but it's grass and the water runs off, especially when you get these deluges like we've had recently. There's just not enough time for that water to infiltrate into a tight turf environment. So any thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more. You're right about that. And yeah, so I think you could encourage landscapes that are not the green grass thing, that they're, have a coefficient that would inhibit runoff. It doesn't necessarily have to be a forest, but it could be larger vegetation or detention basins, that kind of thing that you could work into the landscape. So yeah, I think you could build all that into a system like this and get the best ideas of all of these folks to help motivate, commercial and residential folks to have infrastructure on their property that promotes infiltration, which is good for our aquifers and good for our drinking water supply. Yep.
Alyssa?
Thank you all for all of the good work on this. Just wanted to let all of you know, but the public as well, that if you go to the town's DocuShare, there is a massive amount of information that has been put together from the RAC's work on this. Just to help folks navigate, if you go to DocuShare and search for the boards and committees, you'll find the Water Resources Advisory Committee scrolling all the way to the bottom. And then if you open up the RAC document library, so WRAC document library, then there's a whole folder on stormwater management, which has a lot of those templates that Joe was talking about and permitting feasibility studies. So I just wanted to mention that before I ask you a question. I wonder if you could summarize the discussion that the committee had about your ability to conduct such a feasibility study as a committee rather than paying a consultant, and what assistance you would need from a consultant.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Alyssa. So I at the very first slide there, I forgot to mention the other members of the RAC committee. Some of them are here today. The RAC committee certainly represents a source of expertise. We've been studying all these other towns and reading all this information, so we certainly have the expertise to know what's been happening in other towns with respect to stormwater. This feasibility study, we looked at other feasibility studies to come up with that list of things that should go into it, so we've been looking at these types of studies. We could perform this study. Now, we are a volunteer committee, so it might take a little longer than if you were to hire a consultant. So if you hired a consultant, they might be able to do this feasibility study in 6 or 8 weeks or something like that, whereas the RAC may take 3 or 4 months. We also believe that we would need a little bit of assistance. So for example, if there was going to be a public outreach portion of this, like developing posters with information that have a lot of graphics, that's the kind of thing that we don't have as a committee, but a consulting firm might. So we do think that we could use some help from a consulting firm, but we could also do a lot of this feasibility study. So I think that those are the options. You could hire a consulting firm and they might have a lot of things ready to go. They could do it more quickly, but it would cost more money. or you could hire the RAC and we'd be a little bit slower. And we would still need some assistance, I think, from a consulting firm. And we also were discussing that we may need at least some legal assistance where if we were like, making statements about Massachusetts state laws, none of us are attorneys, so we might want to have an attorney help with that, but that could be the town's attorney or something like that. So we're happy to help. We've got folks with availability, and so if you'd like that assistance, we're happy to give it.
Thank you. What do you think would be the best approach of the RAC doing some of it and perhaps a consultant for part of the work, part of the study?
I would defer to you, Alyssa. I mean, a meeting with the town manager to
I was just curious,
figure that
yeah,
out? or
what
how-
the next step would be.
So it was mentioned, I think, at our last meeting during Corey York's update, the DPW director. I think, I don't know, maybe John mentioned it. But there is an investigation that's happening right now with members of all sorts of different departments, sustainability, finance, DPW, using our consultant, contractor, Woodard & Curran. They operate the wastewater treatment plant. And it's just an initial investigation of specifically stormwater utilities, so one of these options. And a couple members of the RAC committee were invited to come to that meeting. I also attended, and they offered some, estimates about what the cost would be for various stages. And I thought it was interesting because one of the towns that they worked with, it got up and running very quickly, put into place a utility fee and management in like 18 months. And then another town, actually a city, Franklin, took 20 years. So that, has to do with everybody who's involved, how complex it is, the education that's required, and getting people on board. There's a lot of lack of knowledge of the infrastructure because it's mostly underground and out of sight, or in the roadways, and when you're driving, you don't see all those storm drains. So, it's another fee. The consultant called it a rain fee is what people have in their mind. It's just a way to give us another tax. But on the flip side of that photo of the roadway that was flooded, the cost of reacting to the failure of the stormwater infrastructure system is 2 to 3 times higher than actually working and maintaining, keeping everything clear and right-sized and unclogged. I think that RAC will be invaluable in the public education, but I also have confidence that they can do a major part of the feasibility study with their expertise, with some assistance from consultant, town staff in different departments, our engineers, sustainability office. So I'd be in support of looking at that as a way to, because I don't think that it's obviously flooding is here and these deluges are happening, but I don't think that having the analysis take a little bit longer, because we're not going to be able to implement whatever solution until the spring anyway, town meeting. And then after it's approved, like Concord just approved theirs this year, and now they have to work out all of the fee structure and how to administer it. And, talking about the impervious versus pervious surfaces on properties and analyzing that and giving people credit for putting in elements that can keep the stormwater on their property, you add in that and you're going to add in more cost to administer the program, to, go out and look at properties and review and map out and calculate what the fees would be. So it's a big project, and I think that if it takes a little bit longer, But if we want to spend the money on a consultant, then we can direct RAC to move down the list, move down to the second priority that we directed them.
David? Sorry, are you, yep.
So I'd be open to either of these. I think there are a few little pros and cons regarding timing. If there's a supplementary funding source this year, which there might not be, right? And so I think that since the town manager had to end tonight already, I think we can't conclude on that without looping him in. And so I would ask that maybe you add it for a future agenda for a discussion with the town manager on how to move forward this year, whether we want to prepare for a professional feasibility study, article in town meeting, or whether we want to ask RAC to perform a feasibility study and with some assistance and what that assistance would be, or some combination of the two, I think. I think there's some value, frankly, in having a study at, as part of an article in town meeting, because that in itself informs the public, and it informs a different group of people than if we had, listening sessions with poster boards, in the library or various places. I think all those are useful. But anyway, I would like to loop the town manager in to make a decision. That's my.
Sounds good. No, I think that sounds great. Good. We'll carry that over.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
To get the public on board.
microphone and state your name and where you live.
Michael Bialis, Willow Street. Just to get the public on board, that photo of the road flooded is useful. If you have a photo of a house flooded, or you have, was it Leominster? That the whole town got flooded? Something where people understand, oh, this isn't just that I got to drive around this. This is, my basement's flooded. I have real headaches. So that's just one comment. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
So I'm sure we can get photographs from Southbury, Connecticut from a month ago. Two things there. One intersection was so flooded it was up to the roof of cars, and one man who had a prosthetic had to be rescued from his vehicle by a bystander. It could have been a disaster. Fortunately, it was not a disaster. And there was enough water movement in that some foundations, this is my understanding, were scoured such that the buildings are not usable anymore. So there's very significant, these are the things that I fear, with the rate of rain we get now with warmer weather. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Online call-in? Thank you. Great. Moving on to number 8, the public input on proposed gas-powered leaf blower ban. So we're taking comment from the public. We're going to limit conversation comments to 3 minutes. And yes, Alyssa will keep time, and I think David has the presentation.
So I just have a little, kind of a refresher presentation for where we are, if you'd like me to do that.
Sounds good.
While David's looking for that, just to let folks know who want to make a comment, 3 minutes. When 2 minutes is up, I'll hold up a yellow card, and when the 3 minutes is up, I'll hold up the red card. And hopefully, if you're calling in from online, you can see the view of us.
So this is just to kind of refresh people's memories as to where we are. There was a proposed gas-powered leaf blower bylaw proposed by citizens petition at town meeting. But it was curated by a single individual that did include feedback from various boards and committees in town, or with that feedback was curated out, including this one. At town meeting, we would have required a handful of amendments to get that bylaw fixed. I know people were upset about that, but there was even a amendment required by the author of the bylaw. And so town meeting referred it back to us for consideration, so we didn't have to edit the bylaw on the town meeting floor. There's a whole bunch of general agreement about gas-powered and battery electric leaf blowers. Gas-powered leaf blowers are noisy and dirty. I don't think anybody really argues with that. And battery-powered leaf blowers are in general quite capable and versatile. And the industry is moving towards battery electric leaf blowers. These are the kind of questions that I think are still outstanding, and at least for me, as one member of the board, would like to hear in a listening session. And other, this is not meant to limit the discussion by any means. Other people may have comments on other topics, but things that have come up was how quickly the bylaw should go into effect. Should there be different effective dates for commercial versus residential? Should there be exemption periods in the calendar, or a more simple method? What the penalty should be for violating the bylaw? Should there be warnings, or should we be pretty strict with violations of the law in terms of penalties? What would the effect be for homeowners? The good things, bad things on individual homeowners, good things, bad things for landscapers, and who should enforce the bylaw? I will say that who to enforce the bylaw is something I think that this board needs to also, another thing we need to loop in the town manager on. Because it's a complicated topic, and I have heard feedback from other towns that the enforcement is a sore point, and there are difficulties in enforcement of similar bylaws in other towns. Our health department is oriented towards inspections, not violation calls. And even though the health department is oriented towards, I mentioned the health department because that was the proposal in the proposed bylaw at town meeting. But landscapers move around, they're not oriented towards inspections. Police are oriented towards on-call requests. However, some people think the police are inappropriate to enforce a bylaw like this. I will say that our police enforce a variety of laws in town, and there's a short list here of some of them, including what kind of boat you can take on Ice House Pond. So if you take the wrong boat out, someone might call the police. So that's all that I had, Madam Chair, as way of introduction.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? We're here to listen. And just please state your name and where you live.
Sure. Hi, Alan Bunce, Black Horse Drive. I'm just in favor of doing something about the gas leaf blowers. I mean, I'm inclined to trust the select board, which I think is very capable to work out the details, but I'm just sort of speaking in favor of tipping the mindset towards doing something rather than doing nothing. I mean, I've been in Acton for decades, literally for decades, and I feel like this has gotten much worse in recent years. And so I think it's time to do something. The most common argument I hear against it is that, hey, it may push up the cost of, landscaping or, the cost to homeowners. And first of all, I'm skeptical that will happen. And second of all, my opinion is if it does, it should, because someone is paying one way or the other. Either all of us are paying when someone uses a gas leaf blower, or if the costs go up, then the folks who are doing the blowing pay. And I just would say, let's do something to shift the cost, to where it should be. And the silly little argument I sometimes make, just to draw a parallel here, is if everybody who used a leaf blower was blowing their yard waste onto their neighbors' yards, obviously we would all say, stop it, you can't do that. And if the counter argument were, well, that's going to raise the cost of my landscaping, we would say, and it should, because you're blowing your waste into your neighbors' yards. It's the same thing in my mind, except it's not waste. It's noise, it's annoyance, it's pollution, it's toxins, all that kind of stuff. It's gotten really bad. I just would love to see the board do something. I trust you to work out the details. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Davis. I live at 1 Brewster Lane. So I wanted Alan to go first, so you would know him. Because Alan and I recently contacted 27 landscapers. And we contacted landscapers who work in towns that already have restrictions on gas leaf blowers. And our goal was to come up with 5 landscapers who were willing to work to take on new clients in Acton who wanted to use battery power instead of gas in their yards. And we were able to come up with 5, and we've put them on their information is on the Green Acton website for anyone who's interested. What was really interesting were the unsolicited comments that we got. So we heard electric is the way to go. We heard we charge more for customers who want battery leaf blowers. We heard we'd like to switch to electric, but we're not sure how to do it. And we heard I'm giving up 80 customers because I can't make the change. So clearly there's a wide range of opinions and approaches, all the way from all in to let's see if we can work this out to absolute refusal. So meanwhile, there's another trend gaining traction in lawn care called Leave the Leaves. It's kind of a catchy name, you've probably heard of it. But it challenges the notion that we have to get rid of every single leaf on our property to have a nice lawn. Because it turns out that leaves become free fertilizer because as they break down, they put back organic material into the soil. So some of the recommendations are using a mulching mower, and then you shred the leaves, and then they stay in the lawn. Using leaves as mulch in your gardens. Also, just creating, compost, on-site compost. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution, but it occurred to me that, maybe that's a possible compromise for landscapers who feel like I can't do the same work with battery power as gas. Well, maybe they shouldn't do the same work. Maybe the answer is to figure out ways to do less blowing of any kind. So, if so, we'd end up with healthier environment, more sustainable lawns, and less leaves emitting methane from our landfills. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Bialis, Willow Street. I'm in favor of making the change. I also think obviously a lot of this has to be worked through that I don't have detailed information on. I know when the person who presented the case to Town Hall that it's actually cheaper for the commercial people to use the electric power over when you consider how much their fuel costs and stuff like that. Their problem is the upfront cost, which is larger. I'm not sure if there's any way to deal with that, but it is to be aware that it's actually cheaper for them in the long run, besides maybe having less healthcare costs for their employees who are getting poisoned by it and vibrated out of this thing. The noise pollution, I think, is significant, and as was pointed out, more people are working hybrid, so the noise is not just annoying, but sometimes it's distracting from people actually doing their work. So I encourage that. One curious thought I had from the comments just made is that I wonder if this would help discourage people from having quite so much lawn related to our previous presentation about the water department. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, please come to the microphone. And just state your name and address, please.
My name is Clamar Venance, and the way I hold they talk about the leaves below being a barrier is a good idea, but I still didn't figure out today now where they're going to dispose all this dead battery after that. After all, no? Because even a car in a barrier right now, eventually we're going to have a problem how to dispose this battery. It's a chemical too. It's going to be bad for us anyway. So how fast I think before they introduce all this electrical powers, battery for electrical car, they need to figure out fast what they're going to do with the battery. You know, they're going to take it out from here, put another word? I don't think so, no. Because they need to dispose this battery too. It's divorcing the gas. And like they say about when you use a car battery, and it's not my language, it's kind of a little bit hard, but I all my life, all my family is a politician back home. And I also fight for the people, fight for my people and for my city. And I decided this year, my English to get a little bit better. I told my wife, no, I'm going to fight for what I like, what I think is right, you know. That's why today I come in here to show my project for you guys too, from school. If you let me talk about that too, if you have a time to talk, I can talk right now. If you don't, I want to show for you guys what I plan to the town. And go back to the battery stuff. And it's going to cost a lot for the landscaping people, because should they take all the equipment, what are they going to do with the equipment? They're going to sell, give free for other people to use. Who's going to use the equipment? I think the state have to come with a project fast and a project solution fast, and what they're going to do to all the equipment from the landscape fast. Then they introduce the barrier, because people cannot sell the equipment or give free or throw in the trash like they did back home a long time ago. People have a gun, the government decides to take a gun for everybody. And then they have to throw the gun on the floor, whatever it does, they come a big roller and they broke all this gun. And people did pay for the gun and for throwaway. And same with the equipment too, you pay for that, it's not something free. It's a lot of equipment, costs a lot of money. How are the people gonna just give the back for the town gonna need to pay for the equipment, for the landscape, if you wanna do that. If the town, the landscaper gonna complain, say to the town like that, okay, we can do that, but you gotta pay for our equipment for you throw in the trash. Then it's going to cost more money for the town. So I think the states have to have a plan fast, what they're going to do with it, how they're going to put everybody decide to do this project together. I think it's together, everything runs much better. When you demand stuff, it doesn't work. When you demand to people doing stuff, they don't agree, it's not going to work. I think they have to come with a plan fast and say, oh, this is our plan for the town. Who coming for barrier? We're going to give a free or whatever discount for the equipment. whatever equipment you have, we're gonna buy for 25%, 15%, or whatever. We pay 25% to what you have, your equipment for us to throw away. You're gonna give 50% or whatever discount for the battery equipment the town have, whatever store have. You know, they have to come with a plan for them. They do that for change what they want to change. You know.
Thank you.
If you let, can I show my project for you guys? They told me I could have like at least like 2 or 3 minutes.
A project for,
A school shoot. This is the project I'm trying to.
so right now, we're taking comments about
I know.
leaf blowers.
Okay.
So if you wanted to email us, you can email the select board with your topic of what you're.
All right, because they
Yep.
say to me to come and he will say.
So
I
at the
commented-
beginning of the meeting,
Yes,
we
right.
have residents' concerns.
Yeah.
So that would have been the time to speak to something that wasn't on the
All
agenda.
right, thank you.
So our next meeting is early in October.
All in October?
So you can come back.
No, okay, I will come back.
And if you could repeat your name, please?
My name is Cleomar Venus, Cleomar.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Are there any callers online or? Okay. Any residents, we're maybe moving on from the topic of leaf blowers? Should we have a discussion or? I think, Alyssa?
Thank you. So there's a lot of details that need to be worked out and are not agreed on, which were just presented to us and also mentioned by the public. I've also heard that in some other communities, the solution for the noise pollution is a noise ordinance. And I know we don't have ordinances because we're not a city, but is the easier pathway here to investigate a noise bylaw? Because in addition to this issue, it would resolve so many other issues. When are trash trucks allowed to come and pick up a dumpster and then drop it back on the pavement outside my apartment building? How late can my neighbors, who have this live band in their backyard be playing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Noise pollution is a huge health risk. It causes so many health issues, early death, and the government has known about it for decades, and yet there's very little that's been done to mitigate, and I feel like a noise bylaw might be in order for the town of Acton, because so many people bring us complaints about noise that they're experiencing and calling the police, and the police show up, and the comment that I hear most often is they refer to the fact that the town has no noise bylaw. So we can ask nicely, but there's really nothing else we can do.
David?
So in preparing the draft bylaw last year, I read a number of noise bylaws. And there are a number of communities that have, Lexington has one, for example. That's not easier. The noise bylaws are really complicated. I mean, just the things that you mentioned, do you include them? Do you don't include them? How do you measure them? Is it up to the, enforcement authority to come and say, yep, that band is too loud? Or no, it's not. I mean, so it gets really complicated. I think if we wanted to do that, one of us needs to put it on as a goal, and it'll take longer to prepare than this. I mean, we could go in that direction, but it would take, all I'm saying is it's not simpler. Some communities, like Lexington, added leaf blowers on, so they have the noise bylaws typically have a named offense, right? Any of these things, blah, 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 that make too much noise, you can't have, or you have to limit the noise. And they added leaf blowers onto that, and then with some detail. And there's only, in fact, those are, I think, more common than communities that just have leaf blower bylaws, but in all those communities, I believe, every single one that I looked at, the noise bylaw pre-existed. So I don't know of anybody who instituted a noise bylaw for leaf blowers. It would just take more study. I mean, we could do it. It would just take more time and study. And some of those communities, maybe even all, they have a separate enforcement authority for the noise.
Okay.
Who is that?
They made another department.
What's it called?
I don't remember. I could find out for you, but
I can Google it, but that's fascinating.
It's not the Board of Health or, no? Jim?
I first wanted to reflect on some notes that I wrote up and reviewed with a person, a landscaper that I interviewed. And then I want to make some comments on the open questions that you mentioned, David. So I talked to Chris Bailey, who's the co-owner of CS Bailey Landscape out of Harvard. And they were very helpful to talk to because they made the transition last year to electric leaf blowers. They invested, they also got, electric string trimmers, they got an electric tractor. They were making a big move forward, both because they wanted to for the health of their workers and for the growing demand of customers, but also they work in a number of towns that are in the middle of implementing leaf bylaws. So they knew they thought it would be better to get ahead of the curve and be ready for this. So one of the things that they noted to me that sort of influences my thinking about this is that it was very easy for them to change their weekly, cleanups and visits to switch to battery leaf blowers. That worked very well. What they found was that for the big fall cleanups and spring cleanups, that it took them, with the equipment they have, the electric equipment they have, they found it took more time to get the work done, partly because they had to supplement with some hand raking. They were estimating so far that it took about 50% more time to do the fall cleanup and maybe 30% more to do the spring cleanup. So what they do is they were offering their clients a choice. Here for 50% more, you can not only have, you can have your battery leaf blowers for the fall cleanup. And so far, only a few clients have taken them up on that. They expect more to take them up on that as their equipment gets better, and so maybe the 50% drops, that differential drops down as the battery equipment becomes more efficient. They also are expecting that there will be towns. They know that there will be towns where it will be required to use battery leaf blowers, so they will have no choice. So they're preparing for that. They're keeping their eye on the market for, improvements in equipment. And they did affirm what we've heard, that the industry is not really developing new gas leaf blower technology. They're sort of running out what they can, and they are really investing in improving their battery leaf blowers because they know that's going to be the future. So I will send the board and put in the extra information folder this complete document, so you can pull out other helpful things out of there. But I just wanted to summarize that part. Would it be okay if I also gave my thoughts, my recommendations now? Okay. In terms of the timing, There are towns that made this distinction between, that earlier banned the use of gas leaf blowers during the year, most of the year, and left an exception for the fall and spring cleanup, and then, a year later, or some period of time after that, then outlawed it for spring and fall cleanup. I had thought that that was overly complex. But hearing from C.S. Bailey, if we want to move this ahead soon, which I would like to, it might be good to have that transition built in that way. The other thing, the other thoughts I have on other unrelated topics, in terms of fines, I think it's a good idea to have relatively low, almost, the fines that are not big hammers, especially at first. And that will that will help us feel okay about implementing this sooner. We're not going to be, banging people on the head with huge fines if they happen to forget. And we can always change fines in the future. What was the other questions? The only other thing I noticed as a difference between the version of the bylaw that the select board was working on and the version that came from the petitioner is that we had particular things, extra municipal requirements, which I think are very sensible in my mind, and I would be happy to have them in our final version. This was about stopping the purchase of portable gas leaf blowers after a certain date, development of educational materials, and maintaining a list of contractors who contact the town to be put on a list of those who are complying with the bylaw, who have battery leaf blowers. This is the sort of work that Green Acton started by finding these 5 contractors, but I think it'll be even more effective to have that kind of information on the town website. That's it, thanks.
Thank you.
So, a couple of thoughts. I think whatever we do, we should give the landscapers and the homeowners enough time to roll out, amortize the cost of the equipment that they've purchased. So, I think, the draft that we had certain sets of dates. So obviously, they've got to be moved ahead at least a year, if not 2. To allow people to recover the cost of their equipment. And I agree with Jim, from what I've seen in the industry, they are moving more and more towards battery-powered, so it's going to be hard in 5 years to probably even find a gas-powered leaf blower. I think generally I'm sympathetic to folks that need gas-powered leaf blowers or something for that spring and fall cleanup. So I could understand an exemption from any rules for those periods. The thing that frankly annoys me the most, where I live, I think there's only 2 landscapers that work on the street, and I think they maintain every yard except mine. And the fact that it's August, there's very little leaf and grass clippings being blown around, but they still end up leaf blowing the entire yard afterwards. It just makes no sense. Adds to pollution, whether you're talking about air pollution or noise pollution. And, there are some days when I can hear the landscaper start at one end of the road at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you get to listen to leaf blowers until 6 o'clock at night. I can tolerate that in October when they've got something to actually push around, but if they're just pushing air around and running up the bill, I have no sympathy for that. So I could get in favor of an idea where we do allow some exemptions for gas-powered leaf blowers during that spring and fall period. But I think I believe this should have a long rollout. And also, I'm somewhat sympathetic to the idea A homeowner does not use his leaf blower very often. It might take him many, many years to amortize the cost of that leaf blower compared to a landscaper that's using it every single day. So I could see the point behind treating the homeowners differently than the commercial operations. So, as we get into this a little bit further, we might end up, having a chart or trying to figure out times, implementations, schedules, and also, the different categories of individuals using those machines. Thank you.
I just wish we had a chance to hear from actual landscapers, a little bit. David?
So, can I make a few comments?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, first, I'd like to address the comment about waste lithium batteries. Waste lithium batteries easily, well, it's complicated to recycle them, but they can be recycled. Almost all car batteries are recycled now. With some brands of cars, literally 100% of the batteries are recycled. And what they do is they extract the lithium and separate it from the various metals used to make the battery, and they use the materials to make new batteries. Of course, the lithium does have to be mined, but that's one time when the tool or battery or car is created, whereas with a fossil fuel powered car or piece of equipment, oil has to be extracted throughout the tool's life to support that tool or car. And so there is no question that electric cars emit less or tools emit less carbon into the atmosphere after a very short time of their existence. I agree that, we're going to be driving down the used equipment cost market, but I would hope that landscapers are already buying only electric yard equipment, with the exception maybe the biggest tractors and things. They should be seeing the writing on the wall, from this community and other communities, and so it's not, they shouldn't be waiting. Just before this meeting, I went and looked at Lowe's, just out of curiosity. The cost of equivalent backpack blowers is about the same for electric or gas. In some cases, the gas ones were a little bit more expensive. If you add big batteries so that the tool runs for a long time, indeed, the battery electric ones are more expensive, but the tools themselves last longer. So and they cost less to run. So it's a really complicated calculation. I suspect there's not a lot of difference after the tool's a few years old. So I wanted to, just kind of mention a couple things for fellow board members, and I can do another draft of the bylaw if board members want me to. The original bylaw had a warning for the first offense that also immunized you for 4 years against any penalties. So you were given, it works a little bit like, well, it's a little bit different, but there are other laws that if you take some action, you don't have to have any penalty at all. So if you got the warning, you had 4 months to replace the equipment, and then you wouldn't get any more penalty. So I don't know if board members think that's a good idea. I think, after looking at this again and again, that we should leave enforcement to the town manager rather than encoding it in the bylaw, because if we get the enforcement wrong, then we have to change the law. Like Jim, I was originally against a spring-fall period because it just makes it really complicated in terms of dates. But I do understand from what Jim and Dean said that maybe that's a good idea. I think it has one more advantage in that it kind of gives further lead time for the final conversion for landscapers and homeowners. Maybe a homeowner only used their leaf blower in October and November, and they don't use it any other time of the year. And if we give an exemption for the first couple of years for that, maybe that's fine for them. And I also agree with Dean, and this was in the original bylaw draft that we had, that homeowners had one more year to respond than commercial landscapers. I mean, I don't want to make it difficult for commercial landscapers, but I don't think this is more expensive for commercial landscapers. There is a conversion, but we'd be giving them time for a conversion. So anyway, I think this is a good idea to move forward on, and I could produce another draft with any input the board wants to give me, and then maybe we could discuss that and talk about whether we want to put that on the next town meeting warrant.
Alyssa?
I have a couple of questions, or maybe a question and a comment. Can you tell me why the select board version has no severability clause? Jim? Sorry, I'm not the chair.
Jim, sorry.
I asked town council about this, and they said generally in town bylaws, there's no need for a severability clause, that it's automatically part of how town bylaws work. So you can have it or not, it's not a big deal.
Thank you for that. And then my comment is regarding the talk about the fines. I think I said the first draft that came around, well, not our draft, but the petitioner's draft, that I didn't agree with fines at all because it seemed punitive. And the longer I am in this work, the more I understand that fines are really to encourage compliance, and they're very infrequently collected. And if, that it wouldn't be worth the town's time or money to try and get fines that had not been paid. So I just want to state that I think we could have this bylaw without having any sort of fine. Just education. If there's a violation, then the enforcement entity reaches out to the violator and works with them in an amiable way to get compliance. So I would be happy to see no fines. Also, it feels like a fine, no matter where we settle on the amount or whether there's a warning first, or somebody's going to be unhappy.
Jim?
I had a question for David. It says first offense, written warning, and then no penalty for 4 months. So does that mean that someone gives me a warning and then for the next 4 months I can use my gas leaf blower, or what?
That was what we were discussing at the time, exactly that. So it would give a landscaper or a homeowner time to find a replacement, right? If they were in the middle of their fall cleanup, again, that version didn't have any exceptions for fall cleanup. So, but if they were in the middle of using it, they could actually just continue to use it. But if they then got called again after 4 months, the fines would kick in.
Thank you.
So that's kind of halfway between, what Alyssa said with no fines and a very punitive system.
Alyssa?
I'm looking forward to seeing a new draft.
Yeah.
Because every time I see the draft in the meeting packet, this is the second time it's happened, I think, oh, good, a new draft. And then I look at the date and I see it's from February of last year. So let's get a new one in there.
David?
Can I ask if board members have any other input other than what's been mentioned here so far and what we've heard from folks?
I can say that I agree with the seasonal exception, not for, perpetuity, but initially. I agree that the town manager should figure out what department makes the most sense for enforcement.
Thank you.
Jim?
Both versions had this exemption for leaf tractors or sort of large four-stroke devices. One of them, I guess the petitioner one, limited that to lands that were bigger than an acre. But I don't have a strong feeling about that, but I do think it's good to have a clause that allows, sort of these very efficient solutions especially for large lots. So I'm glad that that's in there. I know there was some concern about that expressed at town meeting, but I think it makes sense to me. There won't be a lot of people using that. It's mostly for large landowners.
Dean?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, the two obvious exemptions that I would see with the four-stroke wheel leaf blowers would be things like the golf course. And I know the DPW uses basically leaf-blowing tractors to clear the entire right-of-way of the two rail trails. And, eliminating that, I think, would be a real problem, a real maintenance problem. So I think, I'm sure that if you added up all of those miles of all those rail trails, you've got more than 4 acres. But I think it would probably be worthwhile to make that explicit for municipal operations. I'm a veteran of hand raking the entire common back in the early 1970s. The blisters have finally healed, but I think you do have to realize that some of these really large properties do need to still have, the wheeled, some of them are even self-propelled leaf blowers for a long period of time.
David?
Yes, there was an exception in our draft bylaw for that, as Jim mentioned, and I don't think there's a cost-effective battery electric solution at the moment. There might be in a few years' time, but right now there isn't.
No, I just wanted to add that I have no problem with a fee kind of structure, and also delegating the town manager to figure out enforcement. And I like the idea of incentives, but I don't know if that comes from a manufacturer, or the town couldn't do any sort of incentive for switching, or so. Yeah, sorry. Alyssa?
Sorry, I just flipped the paper over and thought of one more thing. This difference between the definition of commercial leaf blower operation was 1 employee or at least 2 employees. So my understanding is that it treats a very small business, maybe a duo that's working freelance, a couple of college kids home for the summer or something. Is that the point of allowing a pair of operators to fall into the non-commercial so that it kicks in for them 1 year later? Or is there something else behind the distinction between the petitioners, at least 1 employee, that would be 2 people, and then the select board is at least 2 employees? I'm just wondering why ours has more.
I'm forgetting why. I don't remember where that came from. Do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I think that there are, I see posted frequently in the summertime. You know, there's a pair of brothers home from college and they'll do yard work. So that would be, well, I guess they're probably not having one designated the boss and maybe the older brother is, I don't know. But I'm just wondering if there is this little landscaping business that's not truly a business, they could still fall under the residential, right?
I could try to make that clearer.
Okay.
Maybe if,
It just seems like it would protect small businesses,
I mean,
like a
tiny
family,
businesses.
tiny businesses, family businesses, seasonal businesses, and that would be a good thing.
I'll look into that. Thank you.
Okay. I'm assuming that they need to register with the town, but maybe not.
Actually,
I shouldn't have said anything.
I don't think that's the case.
Okay,
And that's one of the issues, right? You don't need, we don't license people to come into town to mow your lawn or whatever. So that's one of the issues.
Any comment, any more discussion? Do we have any residents? Call-in users? Carolyn? Yep.
Yeah, just thinking about Alyssa's idea about the summer guys. And there aren't a lot of leaves in the summer. So,
they're blowing around dust and, they're blowing around dust and pine needles and it's ridiculous.
I'm just not sure it's necessary to protect someone who's, to actually put it into the bylaw that there's a clause for people who want to use leaf blowers in the summer. That's all.
I'm just turning that, thank you.
Want me to do this one too?
So are we going to see an updated draft? Is that the next step or, okay,
And I can let you know when that's done, and then you can decide when it goes on an agenda.
excellent, thank you. So moving to public input on existing sign bylaws. So this is, I know we're. Bye. This is number 7 on our select board goals, which are, we have 7 of them. And we are here to listen to public input. David, do you have anything to say about this?
So if I may, I'll say 3 things about this. One is that the EDC wanted us to investigate were there cases that were inhibiting local businesses by restrictions on signs, and just so we would understand them, and if there was something we could do to fix that. And then there were 2 cases that I thought, I had heard of that I thought were important. And they were the impetus for me to suggest this as a goal. One was the signs on our plazas, which the plaza sign is limited to a particular size. And if there's 10 stores in the plaza, the size of each store's sign at the road is so small, you can't read it. And I think that overlaps with the EDC case. That is a distinct disadvantage for businesses in plazas in town, is that, and that's why you see them, some of them, which it's not legal to do this, but some of them put flags on the edge of the road or sandwich boards out in the middle of the parking lot or other things because, they rightfully, as business owners, they want to call attention to their business. I think there might be more aesthetically pleasing ways of allowing a plaza to do that without having the flags all over the place, but still making it readable for people passing by. So I think that's important. And then the last thing that I heard is that there are cases in town, and I'll bring up one example in a second, where the sign bylaw doesn't take into account, and the planning division knows some of these. The one that caught my attention was businesses that back up to the rail trail are not allowed to put signs on the back of the building, right? The sign bylaw only allows a sign on the back of the building that's oriented towards where a delivery truck should back up, right? No, it's literally what it's for. And so they can have a small sign next to the loading dock or a back door that says, Joe's Supplies, right? And so if you're going in the back door, but it has to be it's a relatively small sign. It can't call attention, but a lot of the businesses on the south side of Great Road back up to the rail trail now. And as the rail trail now getting completed through Sudbury, if people use the wayfinding and stuff that we've invested in, they should be able to find the back of the business, easily. And so, and that was one case, and there are a couple more ones which I'm not really aware of that the planning division does know of, that we might want to consider, that we didn't consider when we made the original sign bylaw, that the planning division knows of now, and we might want to consider changes in those areas. So, I think, as with other things with planning, one of us is going to have to work with the planning division, and then they'll do their usual good job of outreach and proposals and things like that. Usually they would come back to us after discussing with the select board representative a proposal to proceed, right? We intend to do 1, 2, and 3, and then, move on and see if we can get something ready for town meeting.
Sounds great. Jim? And then Dean?
So my experience in talking to a store owner was that the bylaws are very difficult to understand, and that it's easy for business owners to make mistakes. So if they were either simplified or if, really clear, like visual demonstration materials were available, that would help. Now, in this case, this was overlapped with a problem that is not an issue now, but was an issue for a while with overzealous enforcement on the part of the planning department. There was an employee who's no longer with us who was very nitpicky and very eager to get to the fine stage of things. So that, that's less of a problem. But on the other hand, if we do have, bylaws that, basically make it really easy for a commercial owner to make a mistake, then we should just simplify those and get rid of them. Or explain them really super clearly.
Thank you. Dean? Yeah.
So I can understand the situation that David explained about, the directory signs not being large enough. I could certainly understand getting behind an initiative to allow larger directory signs that, are properly designed and reviewed, including, not only the directories at the edge of the street, but also on the front of the building, backs of the building as well. Obviously, when they passed the sign bylaw, there were no rail trails, so nobody even considered that, but I think that makes imminent sense to allow that. I think the push behind this, from my point of view, is that if we allow that, then maybe we can, at the same time, prohibit the plethora of really ugly honky-tonk type signs and flags that are everywhere. I'm thinking along all of Route 2A, that I think really devalues the town. And I think it really sends a very bad message about the town when you see all of that, the A-frames and the flags, and, next I'm expecting to see, one of these blow-up robots. Because from what I can see, there's there's effectively no enforcement going on these signed bylaws now. So, if somebody does want to get one of those big floppy blow-up things, they could probably get away with it quite well, and, our enforcement people wouldn't take any action whatsoever. Also, I look at the huge number of signs that show up at intersections blocking visibility for, nonprofit events, that if you're looking for people to sing in your chorus, probably you don't have to put 150 signs out in town every single fall. And I think that creates, it's a maintenance hassle, it's a visibility hassle. So I think that's sort of a different piece of it, but people that put these wicket signs in within the town right away, I think there should be some thought given to that as well. So those are sort of my problem. My issues is let's try to clean the town up a bit. And if there's no intent to enforce a bylaw, then we probably should have that discussion and just decide, well, maybe we just eliminate the bylaw and just, this will be the Wild West once again. So I think those are my biggest concerns, but I can certainly understand the issues in the past with overzealous enforcement and people having a really hard time. At one time, before we had the overzealous person, we had someone else that would sit down with business folks and take them by the hand and explain to them exactly what they could do and what they couldn't do. So there was more of an outreach. And God help you if you ignored that advice. But so I think long term, it's going to be a long process, but I think that would be what I'd go for. Let's have some more well-designed signs and not so much of this junk that shows up on the side of the road. I have seen other towns, and I'm not advocating this, and I'm sure the Design Review Board folks probably wouldn't be interested in it, but there are other towns where signage is under the purview of the Design Review Board. It's a huge amount of work for them, but as far as coming up with, they actually have hearings on these things, and it gets very involved, but it's actually been spun off to the DRB. So that's a conversation they could have. Not sure that that's within what they consider to be their role, but it's something that the board could think about. Thanks.
That might add, if I can just, some time, just because of the way time the committees meet, it would just prolong is my opinion, but the process. Alyssa?
Thanks. I think that Jim's suggestion to have the explanation of what you can and can't do in plain, clear language, and I'm wondering, do we have a guide? I know that there were a lot of initiatives that Julie Pierce launched, like a business guide. Does any part of that cover sign bylaws?
There is a visual.
A visual, okay.
A sign where you can placement the process.
Okay. Does it cover does it turn the bylaw, the legalese into plain language?
I don't think it dives that deep.
Okay, so I think that would be useful, especially now that a lot of our permitting, or all of our permitting is online, and you might get, so far down a road before you're connecting with a human. So I think a guide is a good idea. Now, that doesn't address adjusting the bylaws, but explaining them once we do get them adjusted. I'm wondering if we didn't have any public comment tonight for our listening session, but I'm wondering if the, current and former members of the planning board and the economic development committee can come in and share examples, just like David did at the beginning of the meeting, of things that they've run up against with business owners or other people seeking permits, and what they wanted to do conflicted with what was allowed. That would be good, just to have a presentation of that so that we could know what to focus on. And that might help planning staff, because it would give them a place to launch from instead of having to go through the pages and come up with it on their own. Because I know a few of them have been here for a long time, over a decade, but I had a question about some political lawn signs and where they could go, and what the, who to go to get permission. And so many folks in the land use department are new, so they had to get back to me after looking it up. So I think it would be really useful to have folks who have served on these committees, give them a place to start from with concrete scenarios that have disadvantaged businesses in maybe other ways. And yeah, I'm excited about this, because I definitely want to see changes made that allows things to be easier, the process to be easier for business owners, and be able to showcase their businesses in a way that is effective. Can we have a listening session with business owners?
I think we need to carry these listening sessions over.
I think that is more appropriate to be part of the process. That doesn't need to go through us. So, the planning division regularly reaches out to the appropriate committees. They staff a few of them that you mentioned anyway, and so they can just get the chair to put that on their agenda and get input. But I would expect that as the first step here, the planning division would echo back a process, and that we'd say yes, or yes, but, or whatever. So that would also be a place that we could insert there.
So I know that there were business lunch hour workshops, and so I wonder if a listening session can take place either at an EDC meeting or at another time when lots of business owners might be available.
I will recommend that to the chair. They are a liaison assignment, so I'm happy to do that. Oh, any more discussion on the public input for sign bylaws? David?
Nothing there, except I would volunteer to be the interface with planning for this.
Excellent, thank you.
I don't have, I have the fewest committees assignments.
Thank you.
So I'm very happy to do that.
Great, thank you. Do we have any callers online? No? No?
Oh, one with the hand raised.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Thanks, Fran. I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, okay. I just wanted to piggyback on what Dean said about, I mean, it makes me feel like less crazy, because I really did feel like, there used to be like really intense enforcement, and then never having been a big fan of the Wild West, I feel suddenly like we're there, and they're just all on 2A, those vertical flaggy signs that are everywhere. So I'm with you, Dean. I would love those to get reined in. It's not a good look. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
So I think those are illegal under the current sign bylaw, and I think in some cases that's being enforced, maybe just needs to be enforced more.
Thank you. Are we, Alyssa?
I just have one more comment I want to make tonight, and that is I really appreciate the language that everybody used around signs. The look, it's not a good look, and I can't remember all of the phrasing that you used, Dean. But what really struck me with reviewing that section 7, I think it was, is that the word character is all through that. We got to protect the town character. And for me, you know, character refers to like the community and who's here. And so built landscape or the look of the signs and how it impacts, saying visual clutter rather than, you know, character. Like, oh, I think somebody said devalue. That was you, Dean. You said it would devalue the town. Making clutter. So I think we should focus on that as well in that section of the bylaw.
I would be curious if they actually help the businesses, is my question. On the flip side of that, but, so moving on, oh, great, excellent. Moving on to review the draft sustainability policy. Jim.
I could introduce this topic to us. So the goal tonight is to get feedback from the board or anyone in the public on the draft that's in our packet. Maybe we could even, I don't know, could we get it up on the screen? Okay. I'm not expecting or even wanting for us to approve it tonight. There's a few things I'd like to have happen first. Most importantly, getting an actual memo from the Green Advisory Board. They looked through it at their last meeting, but it was a small, only a few people were there, and some of them hadn't looked at it yet. So I want to make sure they're comfortable with it. And I expect that we will get some comments tonight here that will cause some changes. So I would take the changed version and take that to Gab and then come back here when we had a version that we liked. As a matter of sort of reminding us how we got here, the Sustainability Working Group, which is a group of people who, sort of assist the town manager on sustainability things. It includes members of the Green Advisory Board. It includes me. It includes sustainability staff. It includes a person or two, depending on how you do the counting, from Green Acton. They had been working on updating this, the 2018 environmental policy. And when we brought it to the board, what became clear was that what we really wanted was a select board driven process. This was the point that David was making quite clearly, that if this is going to be a select board policy, it has to have, select board people driving it. So David joined our group and we made some revisions based on feedback from David and from members of the group. Now it's under my control right now as the only editor, and David and I have been going back and forth on making little changes. So I think we, now we have a process where everyone's giving us feedback, which is great, but the actual changes are being controlled by the select board. So that seems like a good thing. As an overview, what's changed? I'd point to a few things. First is the overall structure, where we now have a series of whereas clauses that introduces sort of the background information and the background assertions that go into our thinking about environmental sustainability. Some of those are the same words as we used in the last policy, but some of them have been adjusted. The third whereas is, I believe, new, that explicitly calls out that, okay, we have a general definition of environmental sustainability, but particularly for Acton, the three things that we want to pay attention to are, do I want to talk about that one? No, the fourth one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Pulling out climate mitigation and resilience, which wasn't explicitly listed in the last environmental policy, and protection or, still says restoration there. I'm going to change that. Protection or, what was the new word we came up with, David, that wasn't restoration? It was remediation, or, remediation of local and regional ecosystems, especially the water system, and public health. So, in all the different ways we could be thinking about sustainability, those seemed like the three that were most important in Acton. The therefores are a little longer than they used to be, but it's a similar structure, that there will be that we will consider how to advance environmental sustainability in all of these different kinds of actions. We'll get a report from the town manager each year about the climate goals and any other emerging sustainability goals. The third one is new, which is an explicit focus on the goal of reducing our net zero greenhouse gases with that target date of 2030, which appears more and more out of date with each day, but it's still a target date. We're trying to do the best we can. And that explicitly mentions things that were not in the previous sustainability policy. Now that we have a climate emergency declaration, we have a climate action plan, we have a climate action tracker, we have greenhouse gas inventory reports. So all that stuff is explicitly mentioned here. The other thing that's new is we explicitly talk about land use planning and decisions, and that's about protecting biodiversity, basically. And the fifth clause was there in a vague way in the previous policy, but it's more explicit here. That's just acknowledging that, we can't do everything. We have financial limits, we have human resource limits, so we need to prioritize things that actually have the strongest sustainability impact. And then we have what we've said elsewhere, which is we'll continue to seek financial and technical assistance from state and federal governments and agencies. And then finally, we have this piece about this policy is deliberately broad because in a lot of cases, we want specific policies about specific matters. And we called out a couple of them here, like the zero emission vehicle first policy and the policy encouraging building with clean energy, things that we've already passed. And we imagine that there will continue to be more policies like that, but that this is a good overarching view of, where we want to be headed and how we're going to get there. So happy to have questions, comments, anything. Oh, and in the version that's there, I think if we scroll down a tiny bit, down to the footnotes, the endnotes, those endnotes are messed up. The numbering is wrong, so I have some work to do there.
Thank you. Dean?
Yeah, I think it's a good document. It's not, I'm always afraid when people come up with these things, we're going to be trying to break new ground, and I don't think you're breaking new ground. I think you're confirming a lot of the decisions that have been made by the select board and town meeting, and documenting it in a nice, handy, easy to understand format. So I read through it a couple of times, and I don't really see a lot of areas that I have any issues with. And I usually have lots of issues with things. So, I think it's I think it's a good document, and I congratulate you guys.
Alyssa?
Aw. I think this is much improved from the former policy. One thing that I would like to see is in the very first therefore clause, a who and how. So are these decisions being made by department heads? When they're purchasing or hiring a contractor, like, or is this the town manager? How does this happen? How does this consideration in everything that is done in the town? And then the second therefore clause, I would like to hear from the town manager what timing makes sense, because it seems when something is set up as we want an annual update, if we don't specify the time frame, we come back and say, oh, gosh, I guess it's been 1.5 years. It's been 2 years since our last update, or 3 or 4. So, that it's very predictable when we're going to get various presentations on and updates on the budget, right? There's a timeline in the calendar. So where does this best fit in? And then we can just, have that in our minds, like, oh, we'll hear about that in April around Earth Day or whatever. Maybe not April, because that's when we're in budget season. Maybe August.
Oh, Dean?
Yeah, in response to Alyssa's comment about point 1, I think, we can work out the wording, but I think it's pretty much going to be incumbent on the town manager, because it's a select board policy. We control the town manager. We don't really have the ability to reach down into the department level. The town manager is the chief procurement officer, so projects, purchases, and contracts would certainly be things that he would have control over. So, just because of the organizational structure of the town, I think most of this is going to land on the town manager, and then he's going to head it downhill to the rest of the departments.
So just to follow up on that a little bit more and to understand any clarification from Alyssa, I mean, I agree with what Dean said, but I would say that the first 3 things, policies, budgets, and bylaws, are guidance for ourselves. We're the bottom line on further policies and what we bring to town meeting. So, I mean, obviously, town meeting makes the final judgment for budgets and bylaws, but we decide what to bring to town meeting for their consideration. And then, as Dean mentioned, project purchases and contracts are under the town manager's direction. So would you like to have 2 sentences there that says, or?
So Dean's answer cleared up my wondering. So I think that this is going to live on the select board page, and if those clarifications help the public understand it, that's a benefit, or a new board member in the future. So even if we all are clear and the town staff is clear on who is the driving force behind each item, I think clarifying it can be beneficial.
Thank you. I liked the document as well. I thought it was to the point, and it kind of reflects the progress that you made. And I don't see any needed changes personally. Thank you, by the way. Jim?
It was a group effort. Yeah, group editing can be kind of painful, but I think we did it. It worked out. I wanted just to respond and expand on what Dean said about not going into new ground, because we did find some places where we had put language in there that was requirements that we had no idea how to implement. And so we adjusted the language so that it was possible for us to research and, make progress on things, but it wasn't, we didn't want to put it in a policy as a requirement. An example would be the carbon impact of the materials that we bring into town. These are sometimes called Scope 3 emissions in the jargon of climate tracking. And it's an area that is, subject to a lot of changing research. It's very tricky to figure out like the full life cycle impact of something that we, buy. So we left it for future policies, like, a suggestion was made about making a future policy about when we would encourage the use of low-carbon steel or low-carbon cement, since those are two big things that in their life cycle, generate a lot of carbon emissions, and there's been recent progress in making alternatives for these that are low carbon. But we definitely wasn't at the point where we could comfortably put that in a policy, because we're still learning. Thank you for all these comments. I think we got a handful of edits to make that David and I can work on. We can get them to the GAB and then bring them back to the board at a future meeting.
Thank you. So moving on to the consent items. Number 11, approve meeting minutes. Approve meeting, well, I'll say minutes. It says meetings from August 26, 2024. Approve private way plowing agreement. Approve a one-day malt and wine license application from Household Goods for an event on October 23rd, 2024 at 530 Main Street. Approve a one-day malt and wine license application from Sisterhood of Congregation Beth Elohim for an event on September 29th, 2024 at 133 Prospect Street. Approve a one-day malt and wine license application from Apple Valley Catholic Community for an event on October 5th, 2024 at 89 Arlington Street. Approve a one-day malt and wine license application from Boston Events for an event on October 9th at 30 Sudbury Road. Accept a donation from McKinnon Printing from Acton 250 merchandise sales for $552 to be deposited in the Acton 250th Celebration Fund. Accept a donation from Digital Credit Union for $1,000 for the Acton Fire Department to provide programs and services that make a difference in the community. Approve appointment of Lise Stunz as an at-large associate member of the Community Preservation Committee with a term to end June 30th, 2025. Approve appointment of Ann Kulsick as a full member of the Council on Aging with a term to end on June 30th, 2027. Approve expenditure request from Acton Community Housing Corporation for $40,000 towards consulting services for the 2025 update of the 2020 Acton Housing Production Plan.
Move to approve consent items 12 through 21 inclusive.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous? And Dean, you held 11.
Yeah, if possible, if we could hold these over until our next meeting, the some of the wording specifically regarding the letter to Constellation, I don't think accurately reflected my comments. So I'd like to have a chance to send that over to the clerk and hopefully have those available at our next meeting.
Great. Sounds good. Dean,
Move that we adjourn?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous.